As promised, I have the other video uploaded for the press conference with the sheriff office. So this has to do with three deputies that were they did a stop at they said that the person ran the stop sign. Then they searched the car. Now I don't have the details of what happened in between, but there's no probable cause to search a car through a stop sign. Um, Anybody, whether you even went to law school or not, you know that. But I'm positive that I know for a fact that you are not able to search the car just because someone ran a stop, unless you can see the drugs in the car or you smell the marijuana. And sometimes officers will lie and say they smell something just so they can search the car. So, but neither here or there. They asked to search the car. The person said no, and they got the K9. The K9 did detect um, a search, which could be why they got the K9 um, to try to smell before they actually search. But I still think the K9 smelling is still part of a search. It's still a search being conducted. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. But once they found drugs, they also found money. The money came up missing, and now this is the result of what has happened when the person asked for their money back after being released. So take a look at this press conference. It's not boring, so try to watch it all because I'm going to try to chop it up so you can hear at the end what the sheriff says because he says the system works. In this case, it worked because the people did their job. But in other cases, it works the way it's designed to work, to favor those of certain color or maybe money. But in this case, it worked for the good because the people from the top did their job. So if you can see the stark difference between the police department and how did they handle violations and misconduct to the sheriff's department. And again, this is also in Lake Wells. All right, I'm going to go ahead and play the video. Comment, subscribe, hit the like button.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. On the first day of employment at the Sheriff's Office, and we hire once a month, I meet with the men and women, and I said I expect you to be honest, ethical, and moral all the time. I expect you to treat people like you'd want your mother treated, and if you do that, you'll have a wonderful career here. And then I go on to explain that, you know, if you work for a fast food restaurant and they catch you sliding pizzas out the back door to their friends, they will terminate your employment and run you off. But there's a difference. If we find you violating the law at the sheriff's office, we will also terminate your employment, but we will lock you up in the county jail. We're held to a higher standard. You can't police a community if you don't hold yourself to a higher standard than you expect of the people from the community. Then I look at them and I say, do you understand what I said? And I have them all say, yes, sir, I understand. These folks forgot. They forgot what they were taught. They obviously didn't pay any attention to my warning. And as a result, we locked these three deputies up on Friday night. And here's how it started. These three folks were on our crime suppression team. We were receiving complaints and actually fears of gang activity and narcotics activity in a community, and they were sent there to try to keep the community safe, stop the narcotics dealing, and as a result, break up the gang activity. While patrolling in the Winter Haven or the Central District area, they came upon a suspect who ran a red light, John Rosinski, who has been with us for about 3.5 years, stopped the vehicle, He was backed up by Jamal Lawson and Garrett Cook. When they stopped, they asked for permission to search the vehicle, which was denied, which is traditionally what our suspects do. We called a canine. The canine did a search and alerted to drugs. They searched the vehicle and they found in the trunk of the vehicle marijuana and alprazolam, controlled substances. So they arrested the suspect, and in the suspect's pocket, it was a female. She had more marijuana in small quantities and $723. When they wrote in their affidavit to put her in jail, and John Rosinski was the arresting deputy, they wrote that they seized a large quantity of cash. So they wrote it in the arrest affidavit, and they also wrote it in their initial report. So this was on the 21st of December. They take the suspect to jail. They have a day off. They come back to work on the 23rd of December, where John writes his report, and he processes evidence, and he puts several pieces of evidence into property and evidence. But they don't put any cash, any money into property and evidence. What the three of them talk about on the 23rd is, uh-oh, the money's missing. They counted it, all three of them at some point in time counted the money and determined it was $723. And then I'll fast forward to the investigation. Rosinski said Lawson had the money. Lawson said he didn't have the money. Rosinski had the money, and Garrett Cook said, I never had the money, but they all admitted counting the money. So they decided on the 23rd of December, we've really got a problem here. We're missing money. We've lost the $723. They decided at that point what they would do is they would all kick in and replace the money, which is inappropriate, by the way. But they never did. And they did not go to their supervisor and say, we lost the money. So time goes on. Rosinski even has a conversation and says, you know, I'm afraid before this is over with, I'm going to get arrested for theft. So they still do nothing. Now let's advance into March, when our suspect's felony charges are reduced to misdemeanor possession of marijuana. Once that happens, our suspect calls property and evidence and said, hey, I would like to have my cell phone and my money back. She said it was somewhere under $730. She didn't know exactly how much. Property and evidence refers her back to the district and to the supervisors where the event occurred. She calls and talks to what we call the RID, Regional Intake Detective. That detective was filling in actually for the RID detective, and she said, look, I would like my money back. So he looks, he pulls up the reports, and he says, we'll get back to you. He calls Rosinski and says, I don't see any money here. Rosinski gets panicked. Rosinski starts talking to his buddies, and I'm giving you the 30,000-foot view because, and you can see in the press release, they have different versions of this conversation. In the meantime, Rosinski also calls down to P&E, Property and Evidence. The Property and Evidence lady goes, no, there's no mention of any money in any of that property and evidence that was seized and ultimately we have. But the Property and Evidence lady went forward and searched all around to see if maybe a piece of evidence got logged by mistake under the wrong case number, and she found none. And then Rosinski says, when he called the lady at P&E, she said he said, call me back on your personal cell phone. So they had this conversation. And he said, did anybody hear you talking to me? Just forget this conversation occurred. She hangs the phone up and she says to herself, Self, that doesn't sound right. So she goes to her sergeant. Her sergeant goes to Rosinski's sergeant. Rosinski's sergeant calls him in and goes, what is this all about? The money. Don't worry about it, Sarge. We got it covered. I'm writing a supplement report. And the sergeant says, stop. I don't know what you're talking about, but stop what you're doing. Everybody did what was right when it came to their attention by our suspect, who is now the victim of a theft. But these three folks. So our Rosinski sergeant gets with his supervision. We start a criminal investigation immediately. This all happens from last Monday. Last Monday's when the lady made the initial request for her money back. This is the first time ever that we criminally charge 3 deputies. And it wasn't just for the event, it was for the cover-up. They attempted a cover-up, and they all 3 committed criminal charges or criminal violation of Florida statutes. Enjoy trust from this community because we hold our deputies accountable and to a higher standard. I appreciate the fact that our deputies and supervisors and employees, support staff, as soon as they got information about wrongdoing, they brought it to our attention, and we're always going to do the right thing. And this is one more exception, or one more example of doing the right thing. There's no difference. They're all in trouble. They're all arrested. They all resigned. We didn't have to go through the termination process with them. They resigned on Friday night upon their arrest.
Sheriff, did they say they were sorry or anything like that?
They said a lot of things when we put those handcuffs on them. They found out getting handcuffs put on you is not near as exciting as putting handcuffs on people who commit crime. But our detectives were really pleased to put handcuffs on the 3 of them.
Sheriff, it seems like a lot to risk for such a relatively small amount of money.
They didn't just risk their job, they risked their reputation, they risked any future opportunities to work in law enforcement, they risked everything over a tiny amount of money.
Hey, can you talk about how it feels, I guess, for you all, because now what if people are hesitant about other officers doing this?
Well, do you know, you're exactly right. There's always going to be a few people going, I told you. Well, here, let me tell you something. The system worked. The checks and balance worked. And you can suspect people, and that's people, but I can tell you clearly and unequivocally, I've got over 1,000 deputies here working in detention, law enforcement, in the courts. I've got support staff working here that are honest, ethical, moral, and they do the right thing every day. And every time, without exception, we find someone that violates the law, we investigate them, and we arrest them, and I go a step further. I hold a press conference. We're going to be transparent. I could have arrested them and then hoped that you didn't hear about it. That's not the way we do things here. We lead from the front. If we're going to hold this community accountable, we're going to hold ourselves more accountable.